Welcome, everyone, to episode 7 of Breakthroughs with Bree. On this podcast, we will be having breakthroughs about our self-growth, our self-healing, and spiritual awakening journeys, all in pursuit of living our most authentic, free, and joyous lives. My name is Bree. I'm an Akashic Records channeler, energy healer, and astrologer, and today's breakthroughs will be on the topic of emotional release and embodied soul alignment. I channeled about this morning. The Akashic Records Keepers gave me the title. I'll go into it more. I can't wait to talk with you about it. Keep in mind, this episode does have timestamps in the description, so you can click around to whichever segment you feel most drawn to. And let's get into it. So, on today's episode, my co-host is one of my therapists, somebody that I worked with in EMDR therapy, had a fabulous experience. We've stayed connected since then. The wonderful, beautiful Megan Zuzevich, who is a trauma therapist and coach that trains master coaches in evidence-based practices to work with trauma. Welcome, Megan. I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here too. This is just wonderful. I'm glad we could connect like this and do this.
Absolutely. Somebody who literally lives and breathes in this field of healing and whatever. And I know when I was looking for a therapist at the time we worked together, I needed somebody who was going to be able to roll in the woo-woo spiritual intuitive part of things, because that's such a big part of how I experience the world. It just can't be separate from my other
Yeah.
things, So I felt so lucky to find you and to stay connected with you, and now to have you on this podcast, because I feel like you really are able to incorporate all these different elements and still be like a total badass and really effective at your work, which is in more of a Western world. You know what I mean?
Thank you. Yes. No, I think you said that absolutely beautifully. Yeah, there are a lot of elements that I think when we give ourselves the opportunity just naturally come together, and the work unveils itself as it's supposed to in the way that it's supposed to. So everything you said was just beautiful.
Yes, and for the topic that we have today too, Megan and I were talking before we started recording that it just worked out perfect, that her own orientation with her work, which I'll have her talk about in a little bit, and what this topic that came through today, they're very much aligned. So I think not only are we both going to have a great conversation, but people who listen to this, I just feel like they're going to get a lot out of
Yeah,
it. So I'm so excited.
I agree.
So, you have my list of questions that I like to pose to all my co-hosts so that we can all get
Yeah.
to know you a little bit. So give it to us. Tell us about yourself.
So my name is Megan Zuzevich. Currently, I am in Phoenix, Arizona. So last, I'd say maybe October, November, I decided to fully move my therapy practice online, and I have been working remotely, and within that being able to travel. So while my initial practice is set up in Santa Clarita, currently I am at my mom's in Phoenix visiting. As far as my astrology, I'm a Gemini sun, a Libra moon, and a Leo rising. I do not know my aura color, so you will have to fill me in on how we figure that out and what we do for that. I believe the last time I did Myers-Briggs, I was ENFP, if I believe. And one of your questions, I can tell you, I'm a manifest generator, but again, when it comes to human design and those pieces, unfortunately, I'm not well versed enough to be able to integrate those pieces into my work.
There's so much.
But
There's so
I'm
much out
very
there.
open to, anything that you want to teach me and fill me in on that, because I know there's good stuff in there too.
Yeah, I feel like for one of the episodes, I'll definitely want to have somebody who specializes in human design on, because,
Oh,
and I'm going
absolutely.
to talk about that in my weekly check-in, because there's a lot there and it's even new to me, and I think it's very interesting. So,
Totally. Yeah.
okay, for the most important question of them all, do you know what your Hogwarts house would be?
Oh, so I feel like I'm really torn on this. Part of me wants to say Slytherin because I just started Kundalini yoga and I have a real connection to snakes. And so
Love
just that
that.
element and design coming through feels very strong. But I feel like they're just from a personality piece, I would probably fit in better with Hufflepuff or something like that.
Yeah, I was like, I feel like she might be like a Ravenclaw Hufflepuff person, but I really love the Slytherin element. I love somebody who's a little out of the box or like against the grain. And the last
Hmm.
guest that I had on my podcast, she also said she was a Slytherin because she just likes to be a little mischievous or like, kind of like
Yeah.
test things or like whatever.
Hmm.
And I love that. I love people who embody and like are not afraid to like claim things that are a little bit controversial. I'm not
Yeah.
mad at it.
Yep. I feel that.
For your aura color though, for anybody who wants to know, Mystic Michaela, that's her Instagram, psychic medium or a reader, like she can see with her third eye, like the colors around people that make up their aura color. So interesting.
Beautiful.
Listen to her podcast. It's great. Her story highlights describe all of the aura colors. That's probably the best place to go like read through them and see what resonates. She also has like aura
Okay.
quizzes and stuff. It's really cool. If I had to guess, I feel like you're yellow for sure. And
Okay.
I feel like you might be indigo yellow. A lot of like people that
Ah,
are therapists end up being one of the blue colors. The blues are like actually blue, indigo, and turquoise. Those are the three.
okay.
They're all very empathic, like sensing, nurturing sort of colors, just to different degrees and in slightly different flavors. And
Yeah.
yellow is very much like trying to understand like the process and the put the scaffolding around things and like, and even if you think about like a solar plexus, like energy, it's like that.
Yeah.
It's that kind of vibe and
Beautiful.
things.
I'll take both of those. I'll take solar plexus and some throat chakra. I can,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. You'll have to read them and tell me what you think though. I would be
I
very
will.
curious what you identify with.
I
Um,
will.
okay, wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing all those things with us. I would love for you to tell everyone that's listening a little bit about maybe it's your story coming into this work. Maybe
Yeah.
it's about, how you articulate to yourself like what it is you're really doing or why you love to do it.
Yeah.
Take it in any direction that you want, but please tell us a little bit more about you and your work.
Yeah. So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, but my specialty is in trauma. I've been practicing now for over 7 years. So when I did graduate school, my internship was actually in the jails up in San Francisco County. And one of the things that they had me, I don't want to necessarily say do, but part of my roles, I would say, um, was to essentially work with the transitional age youth that were in custody. And in working with that population, 18 to 25, there was so much trauma that came up, and truly just conversations with some of these men and women that I will never forget. And really just thinking to myself, like, there has to be more than just the talk pieces. There has to be more than just the speaking to things. And truly through my 7 years, I ended up working in the correctional facilities between two different ones for about 5 years before coming back to Southern California, joining a group practice, which is then when I started my private practice. So being in the correctional facilities for as long as I was, I think just exposed me to a level of working with trauma that when I started working in the group practice and having real access to trainings like EMDR and somatic experiencing and things of that nature, I really kind of began to create my own way I worked with clients. You know what I mean? Like, it was no longer this very standard, this is what insurance expects, and this is the process, and you get 8 sessions, and, it's capped. Like, it's very structured and boxed. Through that time period, I also went through what I would say was my first awakening. Individuals I've worked with have really dubbed it as my Saturn return. And so, if any of you are familiar with Saturn returns, they're real, real, real fun. But essentially, the individuals that I met and the beautiful people that I worked with through my own journey, none of them were traditional therapists. I did traditional therapy through grad school and in my early 20s. And while I found it to be helpful in some way, shape, or form, the energy healing and the insights in the space that was held, especially when we started doing unconscious work. I mean, I accessed things in my own journey with individuals that I never would have been able to touch with a traditional therapist in any way, shape, or form. And it's not anything against the therapist or the person holding space. It's truly the education system and the model in which we are trained in and then expected to become a part of. When my private practice opened, it was right before COVID. And I think even just through COVID and the aftermath of that, there was another awakening where I really started to recognize that the traditional system really benefited from people being sick. And just in my own experience with my healers, but then even incorporating some of these specialty techniques like EMDR and somatic based experiences, clients were having these breakthroughs that I had never in any way, shape, or form had conversations about in the classroom, seen in my practicum, seen just in my day to day. And really, I remember walking out of my EMDR training and being like, I need to figure out how this works with the unconscious, because the second that we can bring these two together, magic is going to happen. And truly over the last, I'd say year and a half, that I've really been able to formulate and see through just the lens of all the awakening is we are so disconnected from our physical, our spiritual, and our energetic bodies. And through, I don't want to say no fault of our own, but we just grow up in a world that is very conditioning. And so when we start to recognize that it is our responsibility and our choice in how we live the life that we want to live, we really take a level of ownership for our own healing. And when we start to then incorporate all of these pieces and look at the body as something that is whole and not broken, but maybe when it comes to a symptom, right, that's the body's natural expression of what's happening. Like there's so many reframes that I have just had the benefit of experiencing over the last couple of years that have just really brought me into the work that I do now, where, it's not years upon years upon years of talk therapy and sorting through things. It's really guiding clients through their own memory network systems, understanding that the unconscious is fully present, looking at every system of the body, trauma responses included, as alarms and systems that have incredibly innate and purposeful responses and reasons for them. And so when we just really begin to completely change the way that we look at the possibility of healing, our journey being actually limitless, right? We start to take these restraints off, and it just becomes a very different experience, if that makes sense. And so all of those pieces together, I feel like have really shaped and formed the work that I do, both with my clients and in the new ventures that I'm stepping into as I train other coaches and health practitioners who really want to understand trauma and the unconscious, because no longer, I feel like, are the ways of management acceptable anymore. Mm-hmm. Not when there's real change and real healing that can happen.
It is so beautiful. I feel like I'm still like taking that in, because there's so many elements to that obviously I resonate with, but I think are transformational and how we can look at our experience with the worlds. One of the things that's always felt true to me is that, like, realizing that things could be different and
Mm-hmm.
that I was the one who could help make them different, and how I experienced my life was like, like the concept of that was, wow, it like set the whole
Mm-hmm.
stage for all of this, because I think so many of us think that we have to stay stuck in, the way that we're feeling and thinking about things, or that that this anguish and this difficulty and this struggle that we feel is somehow like innate to who we are or just to how life is. And I think, maybe one of the things that if you could hear from this is that, like, that is not how it has to be. And there's really great shifting and healing and transformation that can happen so that your life can feel easier and more peaceful and more connected and fulfilled and all of these things. Like, Like that is as much a part of who we are as anything else, and it's just kind of a matter of finding the right tools and strategies to like return back to that state. And I love
Mm-hmm.
too, I feel like you're talking about the current state being like a map of how to get back there, right? Like there's
Yeah.
wisdom in how things are manifesting for us right now. If we stop fighting it, like if we stop like raising up the, trying
Mm-hmm.
and like, if we stop fighting and we instead kind of like, okay, wait, like what is the meaning in this? Like what's the education? What's it teaching me? I feel like it like lays out a whole roadmap for how you can kind of get back and return back to that state of being connected
Yeah.
and present and all of those yummy things that we want to feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, absolutely. There was, gosh, this was probably 4 or 5 years ago in my experience. And I remember somebody I was working with, I don't remember exactly who it was, but I remember them telling me, you don't have to move through it in this way. And that was it. That's all they said. Just planted the seed. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Just fully rejected it at the time. And the moment I was actually in the thing happening, there was just this moment of pause where I really recognized and felt like, oh, I have a choice in here. Sometimes that window of opportunity is small, but this is exactly what they were talking about, that I get to make the choice of how I want to experience this thing. Doesn't mean that that thing is necessarily going to change in response to that, not always, but being able to hold a different experience in your body, in your nervous system, just in all of the subtle energetic bodies that we have, right? Like that's
Mhm.
your experience, right? That's nobody else's. And so I think being able to have that pause, at least for me, just opened up the world of possibilities of like, oh yeah. So if I do respond this way, where does this come from? And that opened up a completely different map, trajectory, quality of life relationship I had with life, right? Like
Mhm.
things were no longer happening to me, they were happening for me as long as I became a very willing participant to show up and do the work.
Mm. Magic. Snaps all around. Before we move into the next stuff, I'm anticipating that some people might be not totally clear on what EMDR, even somatic
Yeah.
therapies are. So I don't know if you want to take a minute to like describe quickly or distinguish between what
Yeah.
might traditional therapies and what these unconscious or somatic things
Mhm.
are and the difference.
Yeah. So traditional talk therapy, think of having a normal conversation. It's going to be predominantly talk looking, you can still be looking at themes and elements and patterns in life, but really when we're talking, we're just accessing the prefrontal cortex, frontal lobe of our brain here in our forehead. EMDR is a completely different experience. Let me go to somatic experience and then I'll hop into EMDR because I feel like EMDR really brings the two together in a beautiful way. Somatic experiences, whether that is the actual somatic experiencing, capital S, capital E, trademark, or general somatic practices, are going to be very body based. They're going to be geared towards looking at how the body is an interconnected system, looking at the hormonal responses, the chemical responses, the organs. Just essentially, it is a body based practice that's going to allow the body that experienced the event to move through the event and however it needs to in order to have that release. If you look at animals in the wild, they don't have PTSD, they don't have irritable bowel syndrome, they don't have any of the chronic diseases that we do. When they experience something stressful, they shake after, right? So just as they have this innate response in their body that lets the process of stress move out of it, we do too, but we become so conditioned to ignore it, turn it off, fight against it, that once we start turning these things off, we have to engage in practices that allow us to turn the body back on. And I don't mean that in a sexual way, but I make that analogy to like if you're turning a light switch on and off, right? If you're fully out of your body, You're not present to your senses. You're not going to notice when you swallow something. You're not going to notice how something digests in your stomach, right? But when our body is on and awake and going, the systems, even systems like dopamine and serotonin, things that we look at for quality of health, oxytocin, right? All of those things are on working, but being able to be in the body and be present with its movement through the experience, that is really the encapsulation of the somatic experiences. EMDR, to make a potentially complicated process short, what we are doing is we are pulling memories out of your long-term storage and bringing these memories that still have significant somatic holds on the body into our working memory here in the front. And through very purposeful bilateral stimulation, what we create within the brain is a interconnected conversation between all regions. So essentially, when you are in a state of fight or flight, there are certain automatic processes that will either get amped up or turned off. And one of those processes that naturally gets turned off is our thinking brain. We don't need to think in order to override the natural responses that our body has, right? Like, how many times have you, even just like in day to day, have been like, I'm going to go do this, but then your working brain starts talking you out of doing the thing that you just said you were going to do. Like, we don't need to be thinking when we need to run away from something, or when we need to fight something, or when all of our energy needs to be directed at an experience that requires 100% of our energy. And so when we purposefully and innately access these memories that are still activating somatic experiences in the body, and we bring them into the short-term working memory, and we get that full interhemispheric communication within the brain, we allow ourselves to tap into an innate process that allows us to change the way we think about the memory. So memory is naturally composed of our five senses: what we think, what we feel, and what we are experiencing in the body. If you were to look at your hand, think of your palm and your wrist as your animal brain. That is all of the automatic processes that we don't need to think about, they just happen. If you make the number 4, that's your emotional brain. So this part of the brain is actually responsible for labeling the emotion and directly connecting to the rest of the body through the endocrine system and the nervous system to get it to do whatever it needs to do in accordance to what the brain is saying. And then you have your prefrontal cortex, which is our thinking brain. So this part naturally goes offline, which means when those senses come in, when that part of the brain that says there's a threat comes in, we've got our emotional brain and the body working together, but this part is not online. So that full communication allows for us to change that thought, which changes how we emotionally relate to it, which then changes that direct response in the body. And then we store that memory back with all the new learnings and all the new information that comes with it. So that when that memory is recalled, or something in your environment reminds you of that memory, your body goes into the helpful response, the response that you want to have, the calmness, the ease, sometimes you don't even know what's happening, right? You just go on with your day, versus the activated response that the body has held since that experience.
I love it.
There's so much neuroscience in there. So I hope that makes sense for a condensed version of
No,
what it
it's
is.
so good. And I think what blows my mind too is that, well, not really blows my mind, but what excites me is that our Western medicine is starting to be able to create that data and that like
Mm-hmm.
scientific understanding of things that in intuitive and holistic communities like have always known and talked about being true, just with slightly different language.
Mm-hmm.
Because like even when you're talking about somatic experiencing, right? Like the energy in the body that's stored in the organs in your cells, like when I'm doing energy healing work with people, that's the energy that we're working in and that we're shifting,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Or when you were talking about EMDR therapy and accessing memories, like the language that I might have used is like memories that have an emotional charge that's so strong that's still stored in your body that gets activated every time anything reminds it of it, right? Which is a trigger,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know, and like being able to kind of like neutralize or release some of that emotional charge so that it's not being woken up in the body every
Hmm.
single time there's something that even like brushes up against that memory. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. And so a lot of you know, the work that I even talk about with clients when I'm doing channeling sessions, the Akashic Records and the keepers talk about this all the time, is about like releasing this energy from your body. And that's a big part of what our topic is going to be about is emotional release, because that's energetic release from the body, right?
Yeah.
And it's these
Absolutely.
repressed energies that are literally living in the cells of our body that are creating some of these triggering experiences and are fueling these patterns that feel so difficult for us to get out of, right? At
Hmm.
least that,
Hmm.
again, in like my perspective of how I work with it from this world over here. So being able to um, feel and connect with those emotions in a way that maybe
Yeah.
is a little bit different so you don't get so lost in them, but they can still emote and move and come up and out of your fields is
Yeah.
such a powerful and really one of the only ways you can truly transform something, because it's like literally the energy of it is staying alive in your body unless you're doing that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yes. 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 Well, and that's one of the things that I've always said about talk therapy because it just accesses that one specific region, right?
Mhm.
It can be great for certain people in certain moments of time. We live in a world, especially within the US, I feel like that is just chronically ill, right? Like we hold so much in our body that talking about it is not going to be sufficient enough for the level of transformation that people not only deserve, but are moving into the space of wanting and expecting.
Absolutely. One of the things that I learned when I was getting certified to do Reiki healing is about the different like layers of our fields. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the outermost layers being like our light fields, and really this has to do with like different dimensions of energy. So like it's like another thing, but our light fields, then we have our spiritual fields, then we have our mental field in a little closer, then we have our emotional field in a little closer, then we have our physical field a little closer, and then it's our physical body, right?
Yeah.
So, like, talking about things is kind of on this mental layer, you know, but really our experience is this integration of all of these parts of our experience, all of these parts of our field, right? So, to
Mm-hmm.
like really have something shift in yourself, which is going to be a reflection of all of those fields being engaged. All of those fields have to be engaged, you know?
Yes. Oh,
And
yes.
I absolutely think we have a culture of people who want to like think themselves out of their reality and out of their experience. And
Mm-hmm.
I identified as this kind of person. I absolutely have the tendency to want to intellectualize my experience instead of feel my experience, instead of
Yeah.
dropping down into some of these other fields and these other parts of my experience. Okay, how does my body feel? Like what, like,
Mm-hmm.
is there tension? Is there sharp pain somewhere? Am I all of a sudden feeling tired or depressed somewhere? The emotions, even if they don't make sense, like all of a sudden I'm feeling angry. I don't even know why, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then what thoughts pop up as I'm experiencing these things? Again, is it a memory? Is it a thing that's just not even related? Right. And then it's this connection with this higher knowing and how this intuition might be coming into the conversation and kind of like helping everything come together. It's a whole thing,
It's the
you
whole
know?
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that somatic therapies are absolutely the future, that incorporating that element is important, because of course the mental one shouldn't be ignored. I think there's a reason why the mental and spiritual field are right next to each other, right? Because our ability
Yes.
to create ideas and process and shift things, our mental field is such a strong part of our field. It's so important. Awareness can be created here, like conclusions and ideas and like all of this stuff is here. That's so important. It like leads a lot of our
Yeah.
experience, you know? So it's an important place to engage, but like we just can't stop there, I guess is my point. And
Mm-hmm.
your point for exactly what you said.
Yeah. Well, and even as you talk about, I read something before we hopped onto this call that was more geared towards manifestation, but really speaking to the embodiment of it. And I feel like everything that you just said just fully really resonated with that because part of the manifestation, right, is the inspired action that you take in response to being in alignment with the thing that you are asking for, generating, etc. Right. And so that action has to come from a mental space anyway. And so I think having just the way you explain that felt very beautiful, where that needs to be part of, but all the other pieces need to be included as well if we're going to, yeah, have the transformations that we want.
You just beautifully teed it up, because literally the channeled message is about pulling things up from our spiritual fields, like down into our physical reality, down into our physical body, finding more of an integration, aka embodiment of this. So like we're just perfectly teed up. But I wanted to ask, what book are you reading? Because I'm also reading a
Yeah.
book on manifestation where they're talking about something very similar. Which one are you reading?
Oh, so this was a post or something I saw on social media. But the stuff that I've been reading in relation to like the layers of the field and things like that, it's all in my yoga teacher training for Kundalini. So
Oh my
we
God,
have
I
these
love
like
it.
fat, thick white books that are just, full of ancient information that as I read it, I'm like, oh, that.
That's it. That's it.
That's it.
Well, for anybody who's interested, I'm reading Manifestation Mastery by Christina Rice, Christina the Channel. So it's a channeled text, which has been so interesting. I've never read a channel text before. And she does this
Wow.
really cool forward to the book that says that, of course, the words are important, again, thinking about like our mental
Mm-hmm.
processing, but there's so much activation codes underneath the words because of the channeled text that really, it's also important how you feel as you're reading the
Yeah.
text and letting the text work for you, right? Like you don't have to do quite as much work as to like taking it from the mental, like let it do its thing, let it wake up the things it needs to wake up in you. And this
Mm-hmm.
book is like out of this world. I can't recommend it highly enough. A huge thing it talks about is how manifestation is really just a matter of finding alignment and
Yeah.
letting things come to you once you're in alignment, and how to do that. So anyway,
Mm. So good.
so
So
good.
good.
For the weekly check-in this week, we were not able to do it last week with Anne. I could feel so much was moving. We literally used up the full amount of time that her and I had to record just on like the Q&A part, which just ended up turning into a two-parter. But I'm glad that I get to do the weekly check-in with Megan this week. And I will go first. So where did I find joy this week? I have been working at a local horse ranch as a like kind of like a horse guide. But my shifts have changed. And so what I'm getting to do is I'm getting to ride the horses like during the shift, just me like on the ranch. And what's been really cool is that I've been working with horses that have some trauma and are very scared or very fearful. And, the owners of the ranch have asked me and a couple other people who, are able to work with these horses so that they can be a little bit more comfortable. So one of the horses, his name's Tobin. Him and the horse that he's bonded with, they call him twins, Taz and Tobin. They're not actually related, but they're brothers.
Love those
Um,
names.
I know Taz is the
So
most
sweet.
beautiful Egyptian Arabian too. Like they're both beautiful, but like they're great. They they were impacted by the Ventura fires a few years ago, and I guess their owner wasn't able to like trailer them out and literally just had to let them loose. They had to run through the fire. They got stuck on the beach, like at like legitimately like trauma. And this ranch was able to like rescue them and take them in after that happened. I haven't been at this ranch long, but as long as I've been there, like they've not been ridden at all. They just get turned out because they're so nervous about getting ridden. So it's been a very long time since people have like worked with them and rode them. We discovered that Tobin specifically is very nervous with people mounting, like getting up into the saddle. That's something about that, like just freaks him out. So, long story to say, this last week, I spent time going really slow, helping him feel really comfortable with every part of what we were doing. You smell the blanket, you smell the saddle. Like, are you feeling good? We'll pause, like really, really slow.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of cuddles and kisses and like, you're doing great, like all that kind of stuff. And then spent probably 30 or 40 minutes working with him, just letting him get used to like me being like on his side of him, pulling on the saddle. I kind of like stood up, like got up on something so he could sense like me being taller than him right next to his back. Spent a lot of time, went over to like a mounting block to where I was able to stand up and like lean over onto his saddle, like my knee on it, standing like little by little by little. Would help him walk it off if he got a little tense, because sure, of course he did,
Of
just like
course.
super
Yeah.
slow, loved him through it. And by the end of these 40 minutes, Tobin let me slide onto his saddle, calm as can be, not a tense bone in his body, ears relaxed. He stayed totally still. I was able to put my feet in the stirrups and get comfy, still
Ah,
calm. And then when we walked forward, he just walked. He didn't do the like jump forward thing that some of them do when they're a little anxious, just calm. And, we walked around the ranch and he's still very fearful and nervous. So, we talked to him the whole time and all that kind of thing. But I was so proud of him. I felt so
yeah.
moved that he was able to like experience that in a calm state. And some people have different ways that they work with animals. And I know they might call what I do like a little bit softer, but I just really try and be consent based with animals, and they show
Mhm.
you their consent, like they have a lot of things that
Especially
they do.
horses.
Oh, 100%, and there's a time and a place to be firm, but especially when you're just first starting to work with them and like you're building that relationship, like that's just like my MO. So my joy
Oh,
this week was seeing sweet Tobin be calm, and like us be able to have that experience of me getting on him with his okay via his calmness, and for like to start like moving forward and all of that after having
oh,
experiences with him when he like was really really freaked out. So
that's beautiful.
I know, I loved it.
I love horse work. I have a friend in the Bay who does equine therapy and a lot of somatic trauma work, and it's so powerful. It's just so powerful.
It's beautiful. I actually, one of the things that came up this week in an Akashic Records reading I had done for myself was um, highlighting that I am likely going to feel very drawn towards opening an animal sanctuary. That's going to be for many many animals, large animals, that's like trauma informed,
Yeah.
where I'm going to be able to do healing work with them, but also it's just going to be a place where like we're honoring the earth and the land and the animals and just this beautiful thing.
Mm.
And since that came up, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so excited for that to become a reality. Like that's literally what I've dreamed about since like high school. If anybody asked me that like crazy job that we say that we have, the
Yeah.
non-realistic job, it was always open an animal sanctuary, open and run an animal sanctuary, like literally since I was young. So,
Oh, beautiful.
so stay tuned, everybody, because at some point that will be reality. Area of growth. Actually, what was really fun was me and my best friend Maddie got selected to get a human design reading through
Oh,
somebody that I follow who's really great. Her name's Erin Claire Jones on Instagram. The way she talks about human design, incredible. Love it.
okay.
Resonates. It's so cool. If you want
Ah,
like an account to follow hers for sure.
yeah.
She was doing a giveaway for one of her students in a program she has teaching about it and whatever for people like in some sort of relationship to do it. Me and Maddie are both manifesting generators. We're both 4/6 profiles, and we're both emotional authorities, which are different characteristics of this that we happen to share,
Okay.
which is kind of crazy that like we have all this in common. Um, we had this reading, and all of the information that came through was incredible, like
Was
resonated like
it?
crazy. What I'll say about the manifesting generator thing, since I know you'd share this, is
Yeah.
that based on the energy type that we have, like we're meant to be doing things that excite us, and we are going to be multi-passionate, and the things that excite us are going to change frequently and often, and we have to like let ourselves do that, So this so this idea of like staying on one thing, or we should do this or we should do that, like no, like we have to be able to let ourselves like, oh, today I'm really excited about this. Okay, I'm doing this, or tomorrow I'm doing this. And like, or maybe I'm doing multiple things at a time. Like we're just that energy type that when we make the most impact and when we feel most in flow is when we allow ourselves to like follow the passion, because we actually have the ability to create a lot of impact and a lot of energy for others when we're in that like that
When
lit
we're
up
in that
state.
flow. Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm going to say my moment of growth is hearing this right now because this is what I needed to hear.
I was about to say, I can see on your face that this feels like a confirmation of maybe something your guides have been trying to like drop in your
Totally.
ear. It's like
Totally.
for any
I'm
other
like, yes,
manifesting
I
generators out
hear
there. You're welcome.
it. Sometimes we need that, just the confirmation to come through. Yeah. Someone else.
100%. That happens for me too, so I feel it. So anyway, those are my moments of um, joy
Oh,
and growth this week.
I
Megan,
love
you
that.
said that hearing this is your growth, and that's totally fine by
Yeah.
me. So what is your what's been your moment of joy? Tell us.
So my moment of joy, there's two. So within my yoga teacher training, we have a variety of different classes that we get to take. And I took a breathwork class on Wednesday. That was just the most beautiful thing I have ever experienced. The breath itself that we did is a I don't want to say modality of breath, but it's the pattern of breath that another friend who is a breathwork facilitator has used with me. And the experiences were completely different, like both phenomenal. But this one was just so, it felt so soft and permission based. And I felt truly when we talk about, right, like giving the body permission to release, I felt so much come up and out of my nervous system and my diaphragm and just like lower chakral area where I'm like, this is old. This feels good to get rid of it. Between yoga teacher training, I feel like really this last month I've given myself full permission to be in the work. So there's lots of different pockets where like that joy has come in because one of the other pieces, I just finished well, we will have our second meeting next week on the 4th, but I'm in the process of concluding my Reiki certification and training. And I finished my last practice on Thursday. So I'm very excited. So as you talk about this multi-passionate, I have never felt more joy recently than I have when I have been doing energy healing on people. And it's just wonderful to experience.
Oh, I am so happy to hear that because I remember conversations between you and I where I told you, like, you should do this. And I'm sure you were already thinking about it then, but I remember telling you, like, this would integrate so beautifully with what you're already doing. Getting Reiki
Yes,
certified is so much easier than you think it would be. Like, it's actually such
it
a
was so
easy,
much easier.
it's like an
Yeah,
easy energy to start working with. Like it's not as difficult as you might assume that it would be. So I am
yeah.
so happy to hear
Thank
this.
you. Thank you. Yes, and it's been a beautiful compliment, I think, to the yoga teacher training and just a couple of the other, processes I've been dropping myself into over the last couple of months. So yeah, it's just, it was beautiful to reconnect back with that true sense of joy. Do you know what I mean? Like there's just
Absolutely.
something when you really connect with that specific like truth in it that just feels so empowering and so good. So that was my joy. And then to hear the feedback just as practicing, right? When people are
Mhm.
telling you like, this was my experience and this is what I noticed and this is where I went or this is what I saw. Like I get super amped up when people are like, oh yeah, I went to this place and I saw this thing while you were, running energy on me. I'm like, that's cool. Didn't know any of that was happening. Tell me more about it. What does that mean to you? It's just, yeah, beautiful. So that is my moment of joy. And then I will say, yes, that confirmation of everything that you just said, where I'm like, I don't know how any of this is going to get integrated, but I don't have to know, right? Like that's one of the beautiful things. I just get to kind of put the how down, if that makes sense, and just
Mhm.
focus on
The next step.
that, yeah, that big picture, the next step, trusting that when the next thing comes, I'm going to take whatever action I need to on it so that it moves in according to how it's supposed to without me controlling it.
I love it. I love it so much. Oh, what was the other thing I was going to say? I felt like something else is coming up. What did you want me to say about this? Oh, I was going to ask you to share with me the information you have about your yoga training because I
Oh yeah.
also, and people are going to laugh about this, I literally have a list of different things that I would love to learn about, to do a program about, because there's so many things I would get into. And by the time I'm later in my life, I swear to you, I'm going to be certified in all of the things and like be able to integrate that. It's just like a matter of time to let myself do it. Yoga training is one of them. Getting even deeper into tarot, plant medicine is something I want to get into. I'm even honestly considering like some of the more like even kind of some of the work that you do like EMDR or
Mhm.
like other therapy types
Yeah.
that kind of integrate some of this work. Like there's so many things that I want to, like at some point I'm going to learn more about human design too, like other energy healing. Like there's literally going to be so many things because I'm so interested in all of it. But yoga training is like literally at the top of the list. So at some point I will get like certified. I'm
Yeah.
going to do that whole thing because it's wonderful.
As you, I'm happy to share all the, I'm doing it through Soul of Yoga. They're located in Encinitas, California. The modality that I'm doing specifically is Kundalini, but I chose that because it has made such a phenomenal impact, like in my practice, if that makes sense. Like
Mhm.
I've always wanted to do yoga teacher training, but it's kind of been on the list, right? I'm like, when I'm supposed to do it at some point, that will be
Mhm.
it. And I've
Mhm.
been doing Kundalini personally for probably the last 6 to 8 months. And it's one of the few techniques where I feel my physical body turn back on, like parts of myself that have been disconnected or dissociated or holding too much. Like I actually feel the energy move. I feel that part of the body open up. I feel what that does to the rest of my skeletal structure, right? And like
Yeah.
just even, yeah, as you were sharing about the layers of the aura, like all of the education and information that they give, it just goes together so perfectly. So yes, I will
Oh my
I will
gosh, I
share.
love
And
it. I
it's
can't
so
wait.
trauma informed. Like it's perfect for PTSD and addiction and all that stuff. So it's yeah, it's
And
powerful.
that's the other thing that I feel like will come to me in the right thing, but it's so important to me to be trauma informed in any of these practices, even though that term
Mhm.
is kind of a little bit of a catch-all, I think. But like what I mean by that is acknowledging and addressing the trauma in ways that helps provide transformation and relief and not in
Mhm.
absence or in opposition or in ignorance of trauma,
Yeah.
being able to do work that helps people bring those experiences to the space and rework them and release them.
Yeah.
um I will caveat, like if there's like very, very acute and severe manifestations of trauma, um maybe consider working with somebody who is like trained and has practices to address like really severe and acute manifestations of it. But I think some of this holistic work can be a really wonderful complement to
Mhm.
some of that. Or if maybe you feel like you're not quite to the point where it's like super severe or acute, then maybe it can suffice, if you're really committed to it, to kind of address that. So those
Yeah.
are just my two thoughts on it.
No, I firmly agree. And I think even giving individuals, this is why I offer the training that I do, and I love teaching it, is because trauma is a catch-all, right? We've got big T trauma and little T trauma, but it's part of the human experience. So when you're working with individuals, especially when you're working with their unconscious, like the way that I look at the unconscious, even with clients, it's through the lens of memory network system. So what experiences in your life are contributing to what is showing up now? Like there are so many innate principles of the brain and just the functional system of our body that we don't know about but are happening behind the scenes on a regular basis, and past experiences informing present day is one of them. And so being able to not just understand that, but being able to have tools that are going to help work with that, right? Like it just opens up so much more education for the practitioner so they feel embodied in the stuff that they're doing, right? It lets the person who is moving through that experience decide who's going to be the person that they choose with them. For what I was going through, I didn't want a traditional therapist. There was no way in hell I was walking back into an office like that. It wasn't
Mhm.
going to happen. And this stuff was, I mean, just to put it lightly, like I canceled my clients for a whole week. Like, and I don't do that. And so for me to have that level of impact, and great, thankfully, I was with individuals who had the medicine bags of various tools, right? Like
Mhm.
emotion code, Reiki, muscle sensitivity testing. I mean, like anything and everything, channeling, meditation. Like there was so much that helped and moved me, that I think giving people not just the permission to choose, right? But even just people becoming aware of that they have a choice in the matter how much more empowered are you in your growth, in your transformation, in your journey, because you get to make the choice.
Period. Mic drop.
Done.
Period.
Done.
All right. For today's channeled message, the topic is emotional release and embodying soul alignment. This feels like a big one. I have like literally pages of stuff that I've channeled through it. So most of what's coming through today is like directly from the Akashic Records. But just a little background on what inspired this. I had a really big experience in the last couple weeks where I was journaling and I was processing some stuff that came up. I experienced tapping into a really big emotion and experiencing it, like letting it fully come out, like coming in full contact with it in an entirely new way than I've ever experienced before, that felt not only very healing, but felt very positive. Like it felt like a really helpful way to be in and to like relate to this emotional experience. Like a whole metaphor came to my head about it. And I instantly knew like, okay, this is a whole podcast episode. So yeah, so that's when we leave this episode. I'm hoping that you, if you have either struggled with like tapping into emotions, or if you've resisted it, or if that's felt very difficult to let yourself be in a moment where emotions come up and like really letting yourself feel them and release them. I'm hoping what comes through today and this new way of relating to that might be helpful for you, because the Akashic Record Keepers certainly thought that it might be. Okay, so this is what they started with the message. And if I'm looking down, I'm literally reading out of my journal that I wrote down as I was channeling all of this. Okay, so they started by saying, we want for you to be rooted in the embodied experience that's integrating your higher knowing. Many of you oscillate between the two instead of holding both. The way that I understand this is like we're like living in our human world, kind of like in the 3D illusion world, whatever you want to call it, right? And then sometimes we get these flashbulb moments of having this perspective on things that feels like it's connected to like our soul and our spirit, right? Like we just see it totally different. You know, you can use a lot of words that you want, that might describe this a more enlightened experience or like whatever, right? And we have these moments where we're living in that and we're thinking in that way, and maybe that does change certain things about how we're thinking about and interacting with our world, but then we kind of almost like get snapped back into like the human experiencing part of things. And we're kind of like back and forth between the two instead of like learning how to be both in any given moment. And it feels like the point is actually learning how to pull this higher knowing like into our bodies, like pull it into our physical experience. Because like I talked about before, I'm even thinking about this in terms of the layers of our fields, which is really the layers of our experience, right? So we have our spiritual fields. Next in closest to our bodies, our mental field. Next in closest is our emotional field. Next in is our physical field, and then our physical body, right? So our physical body exists in this three-dimensional physical worlds, and we're actually able to access and to like live in as much as like a fifth dimensional reality, but it's really being in connection with this 3D world, the things that we can touch, right? And when we're thinking and we're in these like embodied states, we're accessing higher dimensions, but we're not like pulling that knowledge and those frequencies into our physical reality. Oftentimes we're just kind of like visiting and then coming back and then like visiting and coming back, right? So that's what this is going to be talking about today. And that's what it feels like they're talking about when they say we want to teach you how to integrate these experiences so it doesn't feel like you're just kind of like an of two minds about things, so to speak. Okay. This was the next part that they brought is they want to explore us. No, they want to invite us to explore. They want to invite us to explore and feel the truth of our higher knowing and our true essence and spirit. Because part of what this approach will entail is you being connected to that feeling of like your true divine nature. If you've never let yourself connect to that before, I actually have a meditation I'm going to guide us through. So you can listen to it now, come back to it and listen to it later. If you can do it now, I would just do it now because I think it's going to be good. But part of this process requires us to be able to access that knowing of what our real essence is, like our spirit is, like our divinity, right? So I'm going to lead us in a meditation to help us connect to that, even just for a minute. And I encourage you to spend as much time as you can allocate letting yourself sit in and get familiar with this feeling, because being able to access this is one of the foundational pieces of what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to invite everybody to take some deep breaths, get comfortable. Deep breaths in, fill your whole lungs, sip in a little bit more air, and then out slow and fully. We're going to do that again, and I want you to really observe what it feels like for the air to come into your lungs. Connect to your body. Breathe in, big, suck in a little bit more air at the top, hold it for a minute, and release through your mouth. And the last one we're going to do, you're going to sigh on the exhale. Let yourself get an audible sigh. We're really going to release and relax. We're going to breathe in all of that life. Hold it and sigh out. All right, if you haven't already, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes, and I'm going to invite you to come into your heart space. So think about the heart space in your body. Think about your chest. You can put your hand on your chest. Think about the space between your shoulders, your shoulder blades, center of your heart. Think about this place in your body, and imagine a door that's entering your sacred heart space. You can look like however you want it to. Let yourself have fun with it. And I'm going to invite you on your next breath to take a step forward and open the door. You take a deep breath as you enter this heart space, and it's beautiful. It's whatever feels most beautiful and connected for you. Is it a naturescape? Is it a home? What is this place? Just look around and observe. What I'm going to invite you to do is walk intuitively towards the place that's going to put you in the sun. If you're inside, walk outside. If you're under beautiful trees, walk out to a meadow. I'm going to invite you to walk towards the area where you can be in the direct flow of the sun. I'm going to invite you to sit down on the ground, feel yourself lowering down, sitting on the ground, the feeling of the grass underneath you. And I'm going to invite you in your heart space to feel the warmth of the sun on your skin. Feel it warm your body. Feel so safe. Maybe you hear birds chirping. You feel at peace and you feel warm. Now what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you picture that the essence of perfect divinity shows itself in front of you. It's starting to take form, and it can take whatever form you want. Maybe it's some sort of humanoid. Maybe it's color. Maybe it's energy. Who knows? Maybe it's an animal. It can be whatever has shown itself to you. It's taken form in front of you, and I just want you to observe it. This perfect divinity. How does it feel to be in its presence? What energy is it emitting? Let yourself be moved by its beauty. Take a couple deep breaths with this. Being in the presence of this divinity, you're noticing that it does something in your own body. And you look down and you see in your heart, something starts to glow. Something starts to shine. And it's almost as if like a little sun in your own heart starts to shine. This manifestation of divinity in front of you looks at it, and you can feel them tell you that this is its own self, its own divinity in you, that you hold the same essence in your body. It's one and the same. And as you feel this, this little sun, this little orb of energy in your heart starts to get bigger. And you start to feel it in your whole body. You start to feel it in you. It is you. Feel it expand into your stomach, down into your hips and your legs, out of your arms, up in your head. And take a minute to observe how this makes you feel. Like, what does it feel like to connect to your own true nature, your own spirit, your own divinity? Let yourself be moved by its beauty. While you're feeling the beauty of your own true nature, your own spirit, your own divinity, I want you to ask the sun to shine onto you its perception of your divinity, how it sees you. So not only are you feeling this warmth from inside you, but this warmth on your skin from outside of you starts to shine into, and you start to feel saturated with this awareness and this knowing of how perfect your spirit is, of how perfect your essence is. I'm going to invite anybody that wants to pause this, to stay in this space with whatever comes up. Just letting yourself get more familiarized with this sensation and this feeling in yourself. After you come off pause, I will guide you out of the meditation. So as we prepare to end the meditation today, I want you to ask the spirit of yourself, the spirit of divinity, to stay with you. I want you to ask it to stay in lockstep with you so that you can feel it in your everyday life. You can always access it. And as you ask this, the divinity that was in front of you surrounds you almost like a hug, and it grants your request. You are now always able to access this energy. You're always able to access this feeling. And you feel a sense of peace and gratitude for that. Take some deep breaths, come back into the feelings in your body. Maybe you're sitting in a chair. Maybe you hear a fan running, the sounds around you, and come back in to your physical body, out of your heart space, back into the world. Welcome back, everybody. You just made contact with your own true nature. I feel like a little bit emotional. I feel moved by that because that's one of the things that I get the honor of seeing when I channel is how spirit looks at us. And we're perfect. We're that perfect divinity. It's beautiful. It's pure. It's completely untouched. So I invite you guys to do either that meditation or some version of it so that you get to continue to get familiar and to really start to feel the truth of your nature. Woo. Okay, now that we have the foundation of who are we really, our divine nature is the answer. Like that is the truth of our spirit, of our soul, right? Let's come back into what that means to be in this earth carnation, this embodied in a physical body experience of the soul of the spirit. Let's see. Okay, so this is what they brought to me next. After we feel like we have this connection at any point, right? Maybe we're used to living through the eyes and the senses of kind of our human self, right? Which is a big incorporation of the mind and all these other things. But at any given point, you can literally like step into this higher self, we can call it, and see through the eyes of that. Here's the thing is that we might not understand exactly how to connect the dots just yet between like when we're looking through the world through our human eyes and when we take a minute to connect with this higher self and can look through their eyes. We can put down the humanness for a minute and we can look through the eyes of our own perfectness and divinity, right? At any given point, we can see through both eyes the trick, the fun part is being able to merge them to which when you're looking out of the eyes of your body, you're looking through both, right? Um, and this emotional release is um, is the part that will help us be able to integrate into alignment with our soul and with this higher self. Okay, so get this. Imagine if you had some emotion come up that you don't love. That's not so fun. Maybe it's something like self-doubt, right? You have self-doubt come up. You feel it in your body. Maybe it's in your stomach, like a heaviness, or you tense up in your shoulders. You have thoughts that come up that tell you all the reasons why, you're not good enough, you're not worthy, or that you should doubt yourself, or whatever. There's these characteristics of that experience, that embodied experience of self-doubt, right? Now with this tool of you being able to like at any point step into the perspective of this higher self, of this spirit, divine nature, whatever you want to call it. And you can look through their eyes and you can step into it and you can be like, wait a minute, like me being worthy isn't even a question. Like, of course I'm worthy. My divine nature is perfect, like of course I'm worthy, but like, how do I get this understanding, this knowing into my physical body? So as I'm living in my life, I can feel like I'm worthy. Like, how do I do that? And this is the practice that they want to invite us to do. So first, remember to anchor in this higher self perspective. If you need to do that meditation, if you need to spend more time getting familiar with that so that its wisdom feels like something you can access, absolutely do that. Once you start to feel like you have a little bit of a connection, of a grip on that, what they want to invite you to do is to ask your higher self to show you a new way of relating to these emotions or to these thoughts. Let's just use self-doubt as an example. Once you have set your intention and you've asked for this guidance, you come back into your body and you get in full contact with the feelings. You get in full contact with the experience, of course, in a way that feels safe, where you have tools to regulate your nervous system so that, we're not re-traumatizing or anything, but come into full contact. I really like using journaling because it pulls it out of our mental field into the physical, because we're actually like writing pen to paper. There's like a physical thing we can touch that's representative of it. I really recommend journaling. Do what feels good, but that's my recommendation. I want you to come into full contact with the feeling, knowing that you still have this hold on your higher self. You're not going to get lost in the feeling. You're going to be able to access this higher knowing, but you need to be in the feeling for a minute, because the feeling's going to teach you some things. And the feeling is also going to release energy that's stuck in your body that's making it harder for you to be able to be in the energy of this higher knowing, right? Because what's happening is that there's an incongruence. What your physical body and your mind is thinking and believing is different than what your higher self knows to be true, than what your true essence is that you're worthy, right? There's an incongruence. And what we're really trying to get to is alignment, is congruence of your higher self knowing and what your embodied experience is, what your thoughts and your feelings are in your body. In order to get there, we have to address what's currently in the body. We have to do some processing. We have to let our emotions be felt and released. Okay, so we're coming into this practice. My example the other day was with like actual self-loathing. Rough. We all feel it. I don't feel ashamed of the fact that I feel self-loathing, because I know it's human. And because thanks to this higher self, I know that it doesn't change the essence of who I am to feel self-loathing. And I think that's what trips us up sometimes. And this is what they've showed me, is that sometimes we're so afraid to let ourselves come in full contact with these feelings because we're afraid they're somehow like true about us. Like they say something about us and not just about our experience with something. So we're afraid to like let ourselves really feel our self-doubt is somehow going to confirm that like we're small and not worthy. No, no, no. Or for me to feel my self-loathing somehow is like a confirmation that I'm all those bad things that I'm afraid that I might be or something. Like, no, with this connection with our higher self, at any moment in time, we can come back into the perspective through the eyes of our higher self and know, we can feel that all of that is still true. It exists. We're still good. We're still pure. Like our spirit is untouched by any feeling or experience we've had on earth. untainted, not dented by a single thing, right? So we don't have to be afraid that these feelings somehow change how like good we are or like who we are, right? If we can release that, then let us come into this experience and just let the emotions flow, like let them move through us, let them show us exactly where there's a belief or experience that's the root of this incongruence between what our higher self knows and what we're feeling in our body, right? So in my example, I journaled. I just went there. And for me, it starts with thoughts because I intellectualize a lot of things, but I made sure to stay in my body. I stayed in contact with those feelings. I cried. I felt anger at one point. I had to do some breath work. Like sometimes even if I feel angry, just some like little punches in the air, because you just got to you got to tap into like that primal feeling of things. I was like, I'm going to be here with it because I know I'm not going to get lost in it. This isn't my identity. This isn't even like my future, but like I know it's alive in my body or else I wouldn't feel it. So we got to get in it. Journaling it all out, all of the things that I like, I hate this, I hate this. It's just like let yourself go there. Be honest with yourself, let yourself go there. And after the wave has passed, after you've let the wave come up and out and you've been in contact with it in your body, if you got to get up and pace, you got to cry, you got to scream into a pillow, you do it. After you let this emotion subside, you are going to feel it come down. If you need to use some nervous system regulation techniques, do it. Absolutely. I feel like almost like an emptying of it. Like my body feels a little lighter. And I feel that kind of like calm after you have a really good cry and like you're done crying, and you feel like a little quiet and still. Step back into that higher self perspective and let your higher self look at what just happened, what you wrote down through their eyes. Now that this emotion's been cleared to a certain extent and probably some things have been exposed, right? And again, ask your higher self, how can I look at this in a different way than I have been? What I find is that I get these ideas that get dropped into my head about a whole new way to think about the situation. Because what I've learned is that it's really our beliefs about things that are keeping us locked into these emotional patterns. For example, a belief that I somehow have to earn my goodness, right? Like that's just a belief that I have, that I inherited, that I learned. Like that is not necessarily true. And in fact, now I know that it's not true. So me being open to seeing my beliefs as not permanent true states, but just like something I've picked up and being able to look up at them and say, does that work? Is that true? Is that doing anything good for me? And be able to say, okay, that doesn't work. Can you show me a new way to think about this now? Higher self, can you please show me a new way that is in more alignment, that's in more congruence with what feels true and that I'm actually worthy? Like, how can I get this into my physical feeling, my mental fields? How can I start to anchor this in? Right? Once you ask that sort of thing, just watch the magic and miracles happen around you. Whether, again, it's like an idea dropped into your head where all of a sudden you have this aha of like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Like my whole concept of this was built on this belief. Like, of course that's not true. Like I really think that instead this other thing is true. Ooh, journal about that. Put that in physical world, put that down on paper somewhere. Or maybe you get drawn to a podcast that you listen to that has the information that you need to hear. Or maybe it's a book, or maybe it's a post on social media. Maybe you're watching a movie or listening to a song and a certain line hits you and you go, oh, oh, that's the thing, you know? And watch things get revealed to you that you can instead pick up. You can put down these beliefs, especially when you've released the emotions. If you're not releasing the emotions, the belief is still living in your body via the emotions. So another thing that might come up is as you're asking to shift these ways of thinking, you might have more moments where you feel like you need to tap in and let the wave come out. Please do that in ways that feel safe, and please do that. It is healing for your body. You are doing your own energy healing on yourself when you let yourself tap into your emotions, especially when you remember that piece of your emotions don't say anything about the essence of who you are. You don't have to be afraid of them in that way. And for you to release them helps you get closer to believing, like with your mind, your thoughts, and therefore our emotions follow our thoughts. Feel in your body the truth of who you are and of your own essence. It's an important part of that. Okay, So our emotions are coming through, they're teaching us, they're revealing to us memories, thoughts, beliefs that underline all these things, and our higher self is working with us to show us and shift these things. This is what feels like the process of letting yourself come into embodied alignment. It's more than just for a meditation being able to access this feeling of being worthy and abundant and joyful in your natural state, and then ending the meditation and like living your life as you usually would, or like trying to tell yourself, like repeat to yourself over and over again, I am abundant, I am safe. Like there's a certain way that can help. But if you're like by force only trying to like force this into like my experience is that that's just not effective. That's not true embodiment. In fact, that's spiritual bypassing, to like just try and jump up and only live in this spiritual experience with things instead of learning how to pull the spiritual knowing down into your mind, down into your feelings, and down into your physical body as a result. That bringing it into this 3D physical reality is the whole point. And when you do that, your life will change in front of you. It will transform. People talk about manifesting. Like, of course, you're manifesting. You are literally the physical representation of your truest self. All of the things that are a match for that, which your desires are always going to be, your heart desires are always going to be in alignment with your truest self, or else you wouldn't have them. Of course, they're finding their way to you. You're like literally emitting the frequency of your truest self in the physical world, right? Like so many wonderful things happen when we can get to this place of feeling in alignment with our soul, with our spirit, with that higher knowing, but being able to go through this process of emotional release, being able to like really let ourselves come into our feelings and relate to that experience in a new way, which is what I just described, felt like the big aha, the big breakthrough that the record keepers wanted me to talk about today. Let me see if there was anything, any last notes. Yeah, the only last thing that they said that I wrote down is that after you've started to do this more and more, it's kind of like you're like deepening into the truth of who you are. Every time you do this exercise, like little by little, you're going to be able to feel in your body without even having to do that exercise of let me jump up through my higher self's eyes. Like it's going to be a part of your experience so much because of this work that you're doing. It's like you're deepening into your truth. It's like you're deepening into who you are. There are still going to be incongruent thoughts and feelings that come up. That is just like the human experience and human nature. But I promise you, as you do this more often, as you stay committed to this, as you stay open-minded to shifting your beliefs so that you can have the experience that you want, and as you let yourself be really, really honest with yourself, at least in these spaces, your life will change and it will become a lot easier to do this process with incongruent thoughts and feelings the more and more over time, because it's going to feel like that foundation, that majority of who you, like you already know the truth. So again, these feelings and these thoughts won't feel so threatening to them. It will become easier. It's kind of the moral of the story. Oh, all right, Megan, I am dying to know what you thought about this. I'm dying to know your reactions. Tell us, what are you thinking?
I was taking so many notes. It was a beautiful meditation, by the way. I dropped into that. Um, Everything you said fully resonates. Can I speak to, and you tell me if this feels relevant or not, but I would like to speak to some of the physiology and the systems at play behind what you just said, because I feel like when we understand that these processes are actually innate, it just becomes a completely different experience, right? Like I had a client a couple weeks ago come to me and she's like, I'm concerned because I can hear a voice, right, say this and another part of me say this. And when I say voice, it's not in any way, shape, or form like hallucinations or delusions or anything like that, right? But when you access these different parts of self, you start to, if you haven't before or you don't have the foundation to understand them, it can feel scattering, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes, please. I would love to
Yes.
hear. I would love to hear all of it.
So as you talk about these thoughts and these feelings, right? One of the things that I recently learned from yoga teacher training that I'm still conceptualizing, but feels the truest to me, is it's not a situation or our feeling that causes the thought. The emotions and the thoughts are actually originating from our unconscious because of the patterns and the dwellings that reside within us. Our core beliefs of self form between the ages of 0 and 7. So as you talk about, right, accessing these dense, difficult, negative emotions, right? And the beliefs that go along with that. If any of you have seen the movie Inside Out, I make the analogy to all clients. Those core memories, think of those as core beliefs. Your unconscious always wants to be correct. It doesn't matter on what, it just wants to be correct. So if that thought is, I'm not good enough, you better believe you're going to have an entire network system and an island of experiences that are reinforcing that you're not good enough. So it can be very overwhelming, right, at times to drop into some of these. But what you said about anchoring into that truth of who you know, or knowing who you are, right? That's when you can begin to, with curiosity, observe these pieces, right? What parts of me are coming out? What beliefs? What in this dwelling, right? Going back to that yoga teacher training piece, it's called a samskara. So it's a wound. It's a I make the analogy, it's kind of like a house. It's never one experience that is the direct cause of things. It's going to be these multiple experiences, these multiple beliefs, just these various things that create this dwelling for this automatic emotion and this automatic thought to come out. And when we talk about taking the pause, right, the pause is between the stimulus that we experience and the response that we give. Because if these core beliefs, right, this is at least what I teach clients, are operating unconsciously, when you can start to, with curiosity, ask, where did I learn this? What happened? What impact did that have on me, right? And we can get to the honesty of self in that. I think so often in these experiences, just with the way the world works, there's so many times that we justify something that shouldn't be happening, that we take fault or responsibility for something that's not ours. There's so many dynamics of, that's just too many to go into, but so many dynamics of the way we view self through our attachment, right? Parenting, our social peers growing up, school. Like if you were to really drop into even like Bronfenbrenner's ecological model, you're going to see how the concept of self is right at the middle, but we have all of these layers around us. And it starts with the immediate people in our life, and it extends all the way out to global issues that impact everybody. So the things you hear on TV, the songs that you hear in the car while your parents are driving you to school, right? Like we're taking in all this information and we're essentially creating these concepts of understanding within our unconscious as to how to work through those, but they're not always right. You know what I mean? So like whether it's the beliefs of self or the patterns that we engage in, like they may at one point have worked for us, but when we fall back to these automatic unconscious behaviors, it's all of these things that are coming into play, right? So as you talk about the dropping in, the intention in the dropping in, at least for me and what I practice and teach, is it's intentional so that we can begin to understand where we learned the things so we can unlearn them to connect with this truth, to connect with this higher frequency, higher state of being. Even as you talk about truth, one of the things that I always talk to clients too, truth has its own frequency, right? There's just something so specific about it that when you land on it, there is no denying it, right? It's soft, it's subtle, but it's powerful. Like it's all these things rolled into one that when you finally land on it, it just is, if that makes sense. And being in that truth and being able to see the truth of the things, right, allows that untruth and the other pieces that are not in that higher state to, whether it's naturally dissolve away or begin to just take place of, right? So if we have these neural network systems unconsciously that are contributing to our daily unconscious stuff, right? I think they say 90% of our automatic behavior comes from stuff in the past. So when you take that responsibility, right, and you make the choice to say, I'm going to learn and get to know myself so that I can live the life that I want to live, right? It involves us turning around and looking at that stuff. We have to take responsibility now. Maybe we don't take responsibility for the thing that happened, right? Like maybe the thing is not our fault, but how we show up today with it, the way we relate to it, that's our responsibility to look at. I mean, truly, I think the reason that we as humans don't have the same physiological experience as animals with like the releasing energy and things like that is because we start to give ourselves words to go with that experience. We start to make it mean something. We start to put language to it. We become so enveloped in the story that moves the energy of the body up in here that we lose touch with the rest of this. And so when we begin to really come back home to self, we have to look at the past pieces of us, right, that have been formed, experienced, and in that way, bringing it all together to be able to access that higher divinity, truth, manifesting, however you want to name it, right?
Yeah. And I just have to say too, one of my favorite parts about this process, you could call it, is a couple parts. One, that you are going to have a home base, like a what do you call them, the things like the round with the hole in the middle in the water that you hold on to, like the life not like a lifeboat, but
Oh, like it's not a, is it a raft? It's not a raft, but like,
no, it's like, you know, if you were going to go tubing down like the river, like one of those that you could like
yeah,
hold on to. I don't know, who knows the name. You have like a you have something you can hold on to that is already
tangible.
yours. So it's not me telling you you're worthy, but through your own introspection and the meditations, that's why that kind of work, it can be really powerful. Like you're remembering a feeling in your own body that feels true to you. So
Mhm.
you have your own, in your own self, not something outside of you, in your own self that you can come back to. That's your anchor. That's your foundation in doing this work. At any moment of time, you can step back into that feeling and that knowing of who you are, even if you're not quite sure how to connect the dots and how to bring it into your physical body yet. Like that's still in, it's yours, it's in you. That's one piece of it that I really, really love is that at any point, like it's nobody else can touch it, you know, like nobody's telling you what that is. Like you're feeling what that is. And oh, what was the other part of that that you wanted me to speak on? Yeah. And the other thing, too, and this is something I've even said in sessions, and I think it comes back to exactly what you were talking about, is when you start to come into contact with a feeling or a thought that you can tell has been difficult.
Mhm.
Again, maybe it's something like I'm not worthy, right? Or like I haven't earned the right to feel worthy or something, right? This is a very powerful question to ask yourself about any of those. Are you open to believing something different about this? Like, are you open to the fact that your beliefs about this might not be true? Like, are you open to that? Because I find a lot of people are not as open to that as they think they are. Like, they're not as open to stepping back and letting the possibility that maybe they've been operating on ideas and beliefs that are not true. Like they're not open to that. So you can't really do this work if you're not open to looking at your beliefs, looking at those memories, all these foundational things that have influenced the way that you like are looking and judging and evaluating the world. Like if you're not willing to let those change so that you can experience something that feels more true and more in alignment, more in congruence, whatever you want to call it, um, like you're not going to be able to go much further, at least in this kind of work that I'm describing. But asking yourself that question might also click the thing in your brain for you to be able to start looking at it. And with that curiosity that you say about that openness, okay, like, well, what if? What if? What if there's something a little bit faulty that's at play
Mhm.
here that means the conclusion that I get to, the downstream, is like not accurate because the beginning upstream, the beginning of the equation has some faulty pieces. Do you know what I mean? So that's
Absolutely.
those are the pieces that I love most about this is one, are you open to it maybe proving to be not true, or it proving that there might be something more helpful for you? Are you open to that process and considering that? And the thing that you have to hold on to in yourself through the whole process is like your own. There's always a life
Yeah.
raft there for you to come back to as you're trying to like bring the two closer together. So,
Yeah. Can I add a couple more things?
yes.
From an unconscious standpoint, I think this is one piece of ourselves that we are not taught, but is incredibly important. You're never going to remember anything that is going to devastate you to the point of detriment, if that makes sense. Like the entire unconscious part of your body that is always alive, always healing you, always keeping you safe, right? Like healing is a promise. Like you cut yourself, you don't have to tell your body what to do. It has a natural set of systems in place to allow that to happen. Like that is one of the promises that you get in this world if you are open to, right, many different things and willing to make the changes that need to happen in order for that process to be facilitated. But to one of the things that I just like to tell clients, especially because there's always this fear in doing this work, and I kind of dub this like the new shadow work, right? Like looking into the parts of ourselves that maybe are really, not fun or comfortable to hang out with. But when we recognize that, the innate safety and the programs that are built within us are there to keep us alive and not hurt us. And your unconscious mind is never going to give you something that you are not able to digest, move through, right? Like, how beautiful to recognize that you're not going to get anything that you're not capable of handling. Everything that you get, you are fully able and capable of moving through.
And I'm just going to interject before you go on to your next point. I literally had it written down and forgot to say this, but one of the things that the Akashic Records keepers wanted me to say was please know that when you ask for your higher self and your spirit teams to bring you new ways of looking at things and showing you where there's incongruence so you can come into alignment, they're never going to show you something that you can't handle. Like it's just
Mhm.
never going to happen. Like they know you so well, your team, they always got your back, like they're going to give
Yeah.
you the pieces that you can handle. So you don't have to be worried about like being thrown in the deep end. Like have trust. They've said independently, and Megan is so beautifully tuned into this too. Like you're only going to get the pieces you can handle. But like you're going to get the pieces you can handle, and that probably will require a little bit of that but like honesty
And
with yourself. But
yeah,
like it's only through honesty that we get clarity. It is only through honesty that we get transformation. So I just wanted to interject that in
yeah,
there with you, but
no.
please go on.
I love that you threw the honest piece in, because the second piece that I wanted to share, a master coach that is a friend in my life and a business friend, was one of the first individuals that went through the collective reprocessing training. Her analogy, not analogy, what's the word? Acronym, thank you. Um, Her acronym, when people ask her how to do the work, how honest are you willing to be with yourself and me in this process? How open are you to learning new things, understanding new things, right? Like that openness, and how willing are you to implement the change? That's how you do the work. It's all inside. It does not come from anybody else, but it's your choice at the end of the day. And I read something so powerful. Oh, it will come to me as to where I read it. I want to say it was yoga teacher training as well, because I believe it was more philosophical uh, text, but essentially said people have the right to also choose their misery. They have a right to choose their disease. They have a right to choose being where they are. And when I read that, I was like, oh wow, that's incredibly powerful too.
Mm. And I think for a lot of people that listen to this will probably identify as the people who want to help and perhaps have been conditioned to take a little over responsibility for other
Mhm.
people. I'm not talking to myself at all. I'm totally talking to myself. Um, that maybe have been labeled as helpers, which is a farce of a term that is really
Mhm.
signaling your self-denial. Um, in lieu of other people's inability to do things for themselves, like you having to step into spaces that other people aren't willing to fill for themselves, you know? So I think hearing that, like, people have the right to choose their misery, people have the right to choose their disease, and your choice is for you. Like, are you willing to learn how to tolerate that? Are you willing to learn how to accept that so that you can use your resources and your faculties to create your own health and peace?
Mhm. Powerful.
100%. All right, so that is it for this episode of Breakthroughs with Bree. Please let us know in the comments, like, what hit you the hardest, like what your big breakthrough was. I will be so excited to hear. But I'd like to turn it over to you, Megan. Tell us how we can stay connected with you. Tell us how we might work with you. This is your opportunity to give us all the things that we would need to know about you as we leave the episode.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you. I just want to say before even going into that for having me, this sparked something in me today that feels really beautiful. So thank you for having me on. As far as staying in touch, there's a couple different ways that you can find me. The only social media platform I'm on right now is Instagram. My handle for that is I am Megan Zuzevich. You can also find me at my website at meganzuzevich.com. That will essentially give you my one-on-one work that I do with clients through my trauma-informed coaching lens. If you are interested in learning how to access memory network systems and take the work that you do with clients to a deeper trauma-informed level, I will be hosting, I believe the dates for the next training are September 2nd and 3rd. So from my meganzuzevich.com, if you click on collective reprocessing professional training, it will take you to the collective reprocessing website where you can look into the methodology. It will share a little bit of more, about me and my work. And that's where you'll find all the details for the collective reprocessing training. It's an 8-week training. The first component of it is a 2-day weekend training that is 8 hours per day. If you were to think of collective reprocessing, it is my integration of EMDR, somatic work, and unconscious work. And really what I teach practitioners how to do is access that somatic experience within the body so that we can start to identify the specific memories that are coming up that need that reprocessing, that need that release, that will then allow that memory to be stored back with the new information. So there's a lot of neuroscience pieces to it. This is definitely a training for an individual who is already seeing clients, who is already established within their practice, because after that 2 week, the next 6 to 8 weeks are going to be more how we integrate that practice into your work. So it's a lot of case conceptualization. It's a lot of mentorship. One of the things that I got in my EMDR training that I really wanted more of was that community involvement piece. And so within collective reprocessing, one of my missions is to create a space for healers and coaches to come together to share these best practices so they're not gate kept. In order just to take the EMDR training, you have to have a master's degree and either be a therapist or a social worker or in pursuance of a license. And for these methodologies, in my opinion, to be reserved for a select few does a huge disservice to the collective. And so being able to not just teach you, but help you integrate this into your work so you get those results with your clients. I mean, it always feels so marvelous for me when I'm in session or I'm in space with somebody and I get to be the one that is seeing them make these internal ahas, right? Like, this is not like traditional talk therapy where it's a back and forth. I mean, we're accessing your unconscious mind, and through sets, clients are seeing things within their mind's eye that are just naturally coming to them. That is the information that they need to know. And so being able to have space where you can practice and get it wrong and play around and ask questions, like all of that is so important to me, because truly, for what I have found in my work, the more embodied I became in this practice, the greater breakthroughs clients had. And so part of this experience too is moving through your own process with it. So part of that training is not just learning it, but experiencing it. There's a lot of different layers to it. So head over to the website. There's a ton of information. The application is there if you're interested. For those that are interested in one-on-one work, if you go to the meganzuzevich.com, it will route you as to how you can schedule a consultation. But please, if you have questions, you're welcome to email me, reach out to me on social media. I'm here.
I love that. I think what you're doing is so cool. Who knows? Maybe at some point I might end
Thanks.
up joining one of your programs, because I feel like just a
You're
little
welcome to.
like teaser for everybody who listens to the podcast. I am going to be shifting to one-on-one containers. I am going to be shifting to like one-on-one programs with people where I'm using the guidance from the Akashic records and your guides and like my ability to help channel directly from these sources to help like cultivate a container where you can really be deep in your own transformation and healing, like one-on-one with me, as well as maybe some group stuff. So that is going to be, that's where I'm being guided. That's how I can be of highest service to people and help create the kind of impact that feels like wants to come through. So I'm in the process of like figuring out what that looks like. So like I said, maybe at some point I'm going to be guided, like it's time to go see Megan, collective reprocessing, integrate this into what you're doing, because I think it's absolutely wonderful.
Please do. I would love to have you. It's work that is very deep to me. So anyone that I get to teach and share that experience with, I know it's just the ripple impact, right? Like it grows and grows, and that's what I'm here for.
I love it. All right. And if you are interested in working with me, all of my details as well as Megan's will be in the show description. Healingwithbree.net is where you can book any services. I will say, with me shifting to doing one-on-one or group work, I think the like booking individual sessions with me, I think that that's probably going to change sometime this summer. So if you've been interested in booking an individual session, like follow your gut, maybe do it now. I invite you to come into these spaces that Spirit's helping me create, whether it's through Akashic channeling, which is really Akashic activations. It actually has a new name now. So much gets activated when you connect with this frequency of energy, whether it's energy healing or even through connecting intuitively with the information from your birth chart. All of that is healingwithbree.net. On Instagram, Healing with Bree. And again, let us know what other questions or topics you want us to talk about in the comments. And I will see you guys next time for more Breakthroughs with Bree.